Donald Trump will be bracing himself tonight as the first public impeachment hearings kick off in the next couple of hours. Now, the inquiry is investigating the claim that Mr. Trump sought foreign help to win the 2020 election.
He's been accused of pressuring Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son. The former U.S. vice president is a leading political contender for the Democrats' presidential nomination.
And so far, the impeachment hearings have been held behind doors. It will now enter a new phase, glaringly public and televised for all to see.
So expect to see two witnesses testify on day one: William Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, and George Kent, a senior official in European affairs.
And only a few have joined the ranks of impeachment. Andrew Johnson was the first, impeached back in 1868, followed by Bill Clinton in 1998. Neither was eventually convicted and removed from office.
Now, for more, let's cross over to our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Harry Horton. Harry, tell us then, for the day ahead, will these public hearings shed any new light, perhaps, on the investigation, or is this purely politics for television?
Yeah, I think it's more politics for television. This phase of the impeachment inquiry, the public phase of the impeachment inquiry, is all about trying to sway public opinion. We have had several weeks now, as you say, of these behind closed doors hearings, private interviews with different witnesses, asking about President Trump's foreign policy conduct. So I think lawmakers from both parties have a pretty good idea about what went on in this now infamous July phone call between President Donald Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. The job of lawmakers now is to pull those witnesses back, put them in front of the television cameras, and really try and persuade the US public either that Donald Trump should be impeached, or if you're a Republican, to persuade the US public that this whole process is a waste of time, and as President Trump says it's a witch hunt. If lawmakers can shift public opinion either one way or the other, that could then change the minds of senators who will eventually vote on whether or not to remove President Donald Trump from office. So, yes, this is more about the politics rather than fact-finding, but ultimately it's the public opinion that will determine whether or not President Donald Trump is eventually removed from office.
Okay, so what's the Republican strategy for fighting the impeachment inquiry then?
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans have got several different lines of attack that they hope to use. One of the main ones is that pointing to the transcript of this call between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. They will argue that the evidence that's been gathered so far from diplomats and the evidence from that transcript might well be disturbing, might well worry some US citizens, but it doesn't meet the threshold of an impeachable offence. They'll also argue that President Zelensky and President Trump have both argued that there was no pressure on this phone call between the two leaders. And what Republicans hope, essentially, is that if they can... there's so much expectation ahead of these hearings that if they can paint this week as a bit of a damp squib where nothing dramatic or new emerged from the hearings, then that might turn some of the US public away from the idea of impeachment, and then that in turn might put some pressure on vulnerable Democratic lawmakers who are up for re-election next year to back away from the idea of impeaching President Donald Trump. But look, no doubt about it, this week is the most high-profile week so far of these impeachment hearings. And if things go dramatically one way or the other, it could, and there's a big caveat there, it could have an impact on the future of President Donald Trump and whether or not he is eventually removed from office.
Indeed, lots of attention there. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. Harry Horton in Washington.